Hello, welcome everyone. Delighted that you could join us for the discussion tonight with Zubair Ahmad, Stories from Lahore. My name is Am Johal. I'm director of SFU's Vancity Office of Community Engagement. We're delighted to be partnering again with the Dhahan Prize, who we were just did a book launch with Ujjwal Dosanjh a few months back. I wanted to begin by recognizing that we're on the territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh peoples. Really important to recognize these colonial histories and the stories that they shape, and also the important work of universities and arts and culture in reshaping narratives. I think particularly as we're talking about the city of Lahore, my own parents come from that side of the border originally. My father was born near Faisalabad. My mother's family comes from near Sialkot. She was born after partition on the Indian side. And so those histories come together, and the important aspect of bringing these stories of life in terms of the Punjabi language and being bifurcated by these colonial borders, how important it is to share these stories together. And I just want to introduce the person who helps bring these things together, the Dhahan Prize this tomorrow nights. Please join me in welcoming Barj Dhahan.
Good evening. Thank you, Am, and we really appreciate your effort, your team's effort, Simon Fraser University for hosting this evening. It's really intended to be a conversation. However, I will do a brief introduction for our speaker author. Before I do that, just briefly about the Dhahan Prize. This is the world's richest literary prize in South Asia's indigenous languages, and we launched it in 2013. We had a launch event in Vancouver at the University of British Columbia. UBC South Asian Studies Department was a partner with us to get it going. Then we had launch events in Chandigarh and Lahore. I met our speaker today, Zubair Ahmad, on telephone prior to that, and then in 2013, we were in Lahore, and since then, we have grown in our friendship, grown in what we really believe is a very important work that we're doing. And that is promoting literature, particularly Punjabi literature, and trying to bring some of the best Punjabi literature into the larger world through translations. Everybody knows Romeo and Juliet. Even in non-English speaking parts of the world, everybody knows Romeo and Juliet. People have read John Milton and other Western works. But how many people know about Heer, Waris Shah, the celebrated poet of Punjabi who wrote Heer in the late 1700s? It is as rich in its literary quality, its theme, its characters, as is any of the greatest works of Shakespeare or anybody else. And the reason it's not known is because the Punjabi arts and literary community has not done a very good job of promoting the 1,000-year history of Punjabi literature, which we are now doing. Now about Zubair Ahmad. He grew up in an old neighborhood known as Mohalla Krishan Nagar in Lahore. Lahore, by the way, is the cultural heartland of Punjab, which today is in two parts, one on the Indian side, one on Pakistan side. It's a magical city. Zubair's ancestors originate from pre-partition Batala district, Gurdaspur, which is now on the Indian side of Punjab. In 1984, he completed an MA in English from the University of the Punjab, Lahore, followed by a Post Graduate Diploma in English language teaching. He retired in 2018 as an associate professor of English literature from the Old Islamia College. He has been an enthusiastic proponent for Punjabi language, literature, and culture in Pakistan. One other thing, just to put it into context. Not only was this region divided in 1947 but there was also a script divide. Punjabi is written in two different scripts. It was also divided along religious lines. That's something that the British really tried to stir things up. That Punjabi is the language of the Sikhs and Urdu is the language of the Muslims. Zubair is a fine short story writer. Number of collections of short stories have been produced, and two of those short story collections have been awarded the finalist prize by the Dhahan Prize. First in 2013, and in 2020, another one was awarded the finalist prize. A selection of his Punjabi stories was translated over the last number of years by Dr. Anne Murphy, who was professor of Sikh and Punjabi studies at UBC, now is a professor in history. This anthology of stories before you was published by Athabasca University Press in Canada. Its title is Grieving for Pigeons, 12 Stories of Lahore. This book was launched formally in Lahore, Islamabad, and Karachi. This is the first sort of launch of this book outside of Pakistan. So we're excited about that. Zubair also founded Kitab Taranjan. It's an exclusive, non-commercial, non-profit Punjabi bookshop in Lahore and operated until 2009. Then in 2019, it reopened. He has been instrumental in starting the first Punjabi school in Lahore in 1984. He also publishes and edits an annual magazine, which is co-edited with Punjabi author Amarjit Chandan from England. His literary journey is profoundly rooted in his childhood experiences. This is what he said to us one year about his literary journey, and he'll expand on this. He said, listening daily to my mother's pre-partition stories, I was subconsciously born a writer. I dug that writer, found it, and started authoring stories that covered my life, the people, the surroundings, and the city of Lahore. Lahore is in me, and I am in Lahore. And in Punjabi, there's a saying, which I'll translate in English, if you haven't visited Lahore, you haven't lived. Zubair, welcome. Say a few words, read a few paragraphs from your book, and then we'll have a dialogue. Welcome.
First of all, I'm thankful to SFU community for giving me this honor, and it is a pleasure for me to be here with you. I'm also thankful to Baj for arranging this gathering and inviting people. And lastly, I am thankful to Professor Anne Murphy for translating my stories and doing this thing. Lastly, I'm thankful to all of you who have patience to wait for me. I was late, and because I lost my way, I'm a new man here, and I don't know the ways. First, I'm going to read some of the, you can say, paragraphs from my stories, and then so you can have a taste or a touch of the translation. This is a story, Dead Man's Float. In Punjabi, it is Murda Tari. When you swim, sometimes you lose your body and you just like you go with the flow of the water. This is, in Punjabi, we call it Murda Tari. And it is actually a metaphoric, you can say, title. It is like swimming with the time and back to time and present time. past and present. Dead man's float. And so it happened that the house remained within his consciousness, haunting his dreams. If he dreamt of the dead, then there they were in that house. If he dreamt of the living, they were in the same house again. It all happened in front of that house, in the streets of the neighborhood or nearby. He had moved from here to there, lived in various places, and had even gone abroad. But even there, he dreamt of that same house and those very streets. The 21 years he had spent in the house had devoured all the years of his life since. And that was the real tragedy that haunted him. It was not his own house, and so he was forced to leave it. He didn't return for many years after he left. The new tenants continued to call him to visit until they themselves didn't have there anymore. Even the newcomers who followed them also left. The one more tenant came and he didn't stay. Finally, someone bought the old house, demolished it, and built it anew. The new owner built a grand house with a novel design, more than 3 times as large as the old one, with multiple stories and a towering gate in front. When he saw the new house, the pain that was ever slumbering in his deepest unconscious was awakened. He let out a long, cold sigh. The first house was utterly different. It had 3 rooms on the ground floor with a kitchen on the side and a tiny courtyard. Underneath the stair going to the second floor, there was a room for bathing. The toilet was at the top of the house. That is how it was done in the 1960s when it was built. There was a big room on the right side on the second story, and on the left a kitchen and a small room. He stood looking at the new house. He had the old one in his heart. He was watching the new one through the old one. When he could only see the old one and not the new, he became even more dejected. Living in the city so many years, he had finally come to revisit his old house in the old neighborhood. It is our tragedy that we are not allowed to live in the places where we are born and become ourselves, the dreams of which remain alive within us. The beginning of our sojourn on this earth is like a blue sky. Time turns it gray, but remembrance turns that ash color into a deep smoky blue. This is the place between dreams and reality where we keep living and dying. This is a story about the man who comes to visit his old home and he didn't find anybody there. And then he has a flashback, and it is in Italy, in Rome, when he was a young, and he has a terrible night also there. Finally, how the story ends, I'm going to read it. Walking in the old Mohalla, it is as if he is standing in front of her house. At that time, it appeared to be such a big house, but it was just a small house on a tiny lot. It was old from the time before partition, and no one had spent anything on it for many years. Mud oozed from the fissures in the walls. The dark night thickened. The wet air created an unseen, untouched wire in the extreme darkness of the night. The blue flame of remembrance has scorched everything inside. In old times, when out late, he would stop beneath her window and his friend would go on ahead. It seemed to him that someone was awakening behind the window. Our beginning is like a blue sky. Time makes it dull and grey. Remembrance turns it into a deep blue of evening before it becomes a thick night. There is some other place between dream and reality where we live and die. It appears that her window has opened for the first and last time. A long straight line of light stretches down the road, making the drenched road shine like glass. From behind the window, where the light leaks out, a voice seems to emerge. Go home, Barry, and sleep. Shall I read another?
Why don't you read one more?
Okay. This is another story. Bajwa has nothing more to say. This is a story about the changing of Lahore, and as the city changes, the relationship also changes. Bajwa arrives. I have been waiting. He sits for a bit. When the mosquitoes start biting his feet, he says, "Shall we go?" After days and days of phoning each other, we had finally fixed a meeting at our old coffee house on Lahore's Mall Road. But it wasn't really ours anymore. It had become something entirely new with a strange face. This was one of our last meetings when the pleasure of meeting was running low. The Sufi fakir Lal Shah says, the population has increased, but our meetings have decreased. In Punjabi it is, Lal Shah fakir कहता है कि खलकत वध गई है पर मिलनी घट गई. We are meeting less, but the population is more. There was a time when one couldn't even think of going home at night, even after midnight. I sit down in the cafe and don't even bother to order tea. Where are those evenings at Mall? At Mall Road now. Today the black of the night is deeper than soot, and my breath is choked with the fumes of cars. But the mist of remembrance stirs a breath of fresh air amidst the dust. Uncle Political, as he was called, recognizes me and brings 2 cups of tea without asking. He figures Bajwa will be here any moment. The second cup is for him. Of course, he did come. He wouldn't stay. Do not concern yourself with the beloved. Do not fall in love. Mittu, the drunkard, always says, gulping a third drink. This city crawls up my back like a red ant. Thank you.
Thank you. Are we on? Thank you so much. Very touching, very moving. I have read some of your stories in Punjabi, some in English. I'm curious to know that you were born 11 years after partition. It's on. You were born 11 years after partition in Lahore. Why are so many of your stories about partition and the characters are those who lived through partition, survived it, lost family members, many were displaced? But the fact that you were born 11 years after, why is this such a powerful theme for your writing?
Thank you. I think partition has never ended. Partition goes and goes and goes. When some Muslim is do something wrong or he is caught in India, the present government in India says, go back to Pakistan. You Muslims, go back to Pakistan. Every day, after some time, we have opened there a Kartarpur, where it is a kind of bridge between two Punjabs. Here and there, after some time, after 2 months or in a year, we heard a story that two person, brother and sister, have met after 75 years or 76 years. So partition is always there. And I think that when the partition had occurred, after, as Urshi Batala has written, other voices, we didn't talk about the partition for many, many years. It is just now, before 10 years back, and maybe now, that now we have a museum in Amritsar, Partition Museum, and there is another lady, Gunita, who in California has made an archive of the partition people, and she's collecting stories. So partition is always there. As my family was uprooted, and Gurdaspur, and from Batala we came. So my mother was maybe 13, 14-year-old. And this is a very personal thing, that she lost my father, you can say, her husband, when she was only 30-year-old. So all her life, she has been telling stories about before partition, and her days because she was a girl, something like that. And also my uncles and other people, they have always been talking about. So consciously or unconsciously, you can say, I became, the stories, pre-partition stories, or the stories of partition, became part of my unconscious. So when I grow up, I was very fond of reading books. And we have Anna libraries in Lahore, which is, you can say, one penny library. And I read a lot. So after some time, we were living in a house. It was actually a collective kind of property. So when I was young, maybe I was 21-year-old, it was discovered that we are no longer going to live in that house. The house is going to be sold, because there were some partner or other people who were going to inherit that property. It makes me very angry. It makes me so angry that I didn't go back to that Mohalla for many, many years, maybe 10 years or 15 years. And in that memory, I wrote these stories.
Wow. This reminds me of my mother-in-law, who passed away this year at the age of 90. She and her family are displaced people from what is today Ukraine. And when Russia invaded Ukraine, she said, I can't look at the television screen and the news. All the memories of pain and suffering, they flood back. So as you say, partition, its effects still are there within your family, within many, many people. Those of you, just for the benefit of those of you who may not know, 1947, what happened to then British India, suddenly a demarcation line is made by a British guy named Radcliffe, who went to that part and stayed there for about 2 months and then drew a line. And that's how Punjab was divided. It's the largest forced displacement of people in the history of the world, as many as 12 million. And historians agree that a minimum 1 million people were killed. Neighbor turning against neighbor, Muslim against Sikh, Muslim against Hindu, Hindu against Sikh, Muslim. So Zubair, you say you heard those stories from your mother as well, your family's history. People sharing things, what they had experienced or their memories of it. Has writing, for you at a personal level, writing these stories, brought any degree of healing to the trauma that maybe you may be carrying from your mother?
Yes, I was, you can say, haunted by these stories. And the only salvation or mukti for me was to write them. Actually, I don't know how the stories came. The creation is a very mystical experience. You can never explain how the ideas come. Many things are working, and many things are happening, and there is a strange kind of chemistry behind every writing. So the stories, I can say, they just burst out. And I didn't write the story. Actually, the stories were just written by me. And maybe you can say, another thing is that it is very important, I think, that we should write about the stories of partition. Unfortunately, Pakistan, they say, came into being on the name of Islam, and they justify its creation. And all the people who died during the partition, especially Muslims, our national narrative says that they have sacrificed their life for a new country. They are shaheed. They were martyred. And all the people, what I know, the real history tells us, my mother used to tell me, I never saw Qaid-e-Azam. I never saw Gandhi. I don't know who they were. These people, most of the people, as Baj says, about 1 million people died. About maybe 1 lakh women were killed and raped. And almost 100 and 120 million people migrated from one side to another side. So our people, the Punjabis, both sides of the border, have never accepted partition. They say, Jad ujade paye, jad lutta paiyan, when there was a loot, when we were uprooted from our home. And all our poets, Faiz Ahmad Faiz, Ustad Aman, Ahmad Rahi, all our poets had disowned partition. Faiz Sahib is the very famous poet. He says, Daag daag ujala, ye shab gazida seher, tha intezar jiska, ye wo seher to nahi. The evening, morning we were waiting for. This is so dim. Have we been waiting for this morning? And our great poet, Punjabi poet, Ustad Ahmad says, ਲਾਲੀ ਅੱਖਾਂ ਦੀ ਪਈ ਦੱਸਦੀ ਹੈ ਰੋਏ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਵੀ ਹੋ ਰੋਏ ਅਸੀਂ ਵੀ ਹਾਂ ਲੁੱਟਣ ਵਾਲਿਆਂ ਰੱਜ ਕੇ ਲੁੱਟਿਆ ਹੈ ਰੋਏ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਵੀ ਹੋ ਰੋਏ ਅਸੀਂ ਵੀ ਹਾਂ we have wept, we have been looted, and what kind of this independence was. So in Muslim, there is another writer, Intezar Hussain, Urdu writer, he says that this is a migration. As our holy prophet has migrated from Makkah to Medina, that they say that it is a migration. They justify it. But it is only the writers like me, you can say, who has put resistance. It is actually, we are writing the real history. Not politicians are not going to write. Congress is not going to write. Muslim League is not going to write. We are writing people's history. Whether other side of the border or this side of the border. We are talking, we are writing what actually had happened. How people were killed and they were innocent. All of the people were innocent. They have nothing to do with the politics. So I think it is very important to speak and to write these stories.
With your mother, did she read or you read any of your stories to your mother? And what was her response?
Well, it is very emotional question. So she would just weep.
Right. Again, just to relate, the world can be a terrible place, and it is parts of the world. Terrible things are happening today, similar to what was happening before in 1947. What happened in Europe. My wife was glancing through my mother's journals, and in 1991, I think they were planning to go to Middle East, to Israel, to travel. And she wrote on this page, she said, what one member of the family does, it affects all members of the family. What one country or what one group of people do, it affects everybody else, the whole world. I fear if the war breaks out in the Middle East, it will affect all of us. So the effects are very, very real. You said when you were young, there were libraries that you could take books out. You would read books. From those early years in your life, what are 2 books that has had a lasting impact or influence on you?
I am actually the product of the 70s. If you read my stories, here there was also a sentence that there used to be an evening of Mall Road, which is no longer there because of the pollution, overpopulation, and many other things. So when I was reading in college in 1973, 74, 75, 70s is a great time in Pakistan. The first thing is that Zade Bhutto was elected as a prime minister, and after many, many years, we have an election. Before there was dictatorship. I was born in dictatorship, and I may die in a certain kind of dictatorship. So it is always there. We are the product of military rulers and all others. So there was a freedom, and there was a leftist politics going on in the colleges. So I was very young and caught by the comrades and the leftist, and they told me, you read this book or read that book and other books. So the Russian literature was coming into translation. It was in Urdu coming in. So I read Maxim Gorky's Mother and Dostoevsky's novels. And in Urdu literature, I was very much inspired by Quratul and Haidar's Aag Ka Darya. And of course, Saadat Hasan Manto is always there. So I was, you can say, I was not in Punjabi at that time. I later came into decided writing Punjabi. And there was another kind of my guru, you can say, and he said to me, everybody is writing in Urdu. So who will write in Punjabi? So this you can say, Punjabi kandane ek gal manu kha gayi. So I never turned back. So it took me many years my Urdu was very good. I have written a lot of poems and short stories. But once I decided to write in Punjabi, I never wrote a single word in Urdu again. And all my writings were lost. So these were the books, and these were the early influences, which you can say consciously or unconsciously helped me to become a writer.
One of the impacts of partition was not only was Punjab divided, but Bengal was also divided. One Bengal became part of India, other became East Pakistan. And Urdu was imposed on Bengali people. It's the Bengalis who started this movement around mother language. The origins of the Mother Language Day are with the Bengali people as a reaction to the Pakistani government who had imposed Urdu. And those people are Bengali, their language is Bengali. So maybe that's a good thing that came out of partition, but with a lot of pain and suffering. Now, tell us a little bit about the state or status of Punjabi within Pakistan today.
Thank you. Good question. I normally say, and we other activists in West Punjab say, that after the annexation of Punjab in 1849, it is almost, maybe you can say, 175 years have gone. This is actually the history, the time of Muslims' alienation from their language. When the British came there, they imposed Urdu and English and other, made public school, etc., etc. We have a very rich history of Punjabi literature, starting from Baba Farid, 11th, 12th century, up till 19th century or 20th century. So, but when the Urdu was imposed, the Muslim aristocracy of Punjab at once accepted Urdu, because Persian was there for the last 100 years. So they think that there was a kind of fragrance of Persian in Urdu. So they very happily accepted Urdu. Urdu was taught, and with passage of time, you say, the Urdu poets were born. Even our national poet, Allama Iqbal, wrote in Urdu and in Persian, and that is because of the readership. After partition, it was expected that the policies of the Britishers or colonialism would have changed, but they have not. The policies have continued up till now. After even 75 years or 76 years, there is no space for Punjabi in state structure. It is not being taught as a primary language, as a mother tongue. Some year back, I was attending a function like about languages in Islamabad, and the information minister was sitting before me, in front of me. So I got stirred up, and I thought that I should give him a good lesson. So I said to him that there is a one nation, there is a one language, and there is a one religion. This national narrative of Pakistan is wrong. We have created Bangladesh out of united Pakistan just because we have not accepted their language. The first you can say the crack in the united Pakistan came because when Quaid-e-Azam went in Dhaka, he said Urdu will be our national language, and Bengalis refused. So how many Bangladeshis we are going to have in this present Pakistan? It is better. Pakistan is a multicultural, multilingual society. When we give too much stress on religion, the minorities suffer. It is also there is not one religion. There are people of also other religions. There are a lot of Christians there living in Pakistan. So this narrative of one nation, one language, or one religion should be changed. Pakistan is a multilingual, multicultural, and multi-religious country. And until or unless our central government, Pakistani government, would not consider it Nothing is going to be. One of our friends says that day when the Punjabi would be introduced in schools, there will almost 5 million Punjabi qaidas would be published. It will change Pakistan. I also said that if we have been teaching Bulla Shah or Shah Hussain, there would have been not any bomb blast in mosque or in the Imam Bargaha and other places, because not a single poet of single Punjabi poet starting from Baba Farid, there is a single line or a single verse against any religion, caste, racism. There is nothing. The total preaching of all Punjabi classical poet is love, the love of humanity.
Thank you so much about that. Pakistan is home to almost 400 languages. Punjabi is the largest. More people speak Punjabi in Pakistan than they do in India. Pakistan has almost 100 million people that are Punjabis. Their first language is Punjabi, but it's not taught. It's not the official language. Here we are in Canada. Punjabi has been spoken here for 125 years. And many efforts have been made. We have a very dynamic, vibrant ethnic media. Good news for Punjabi is that it is a language you can take in some elementary schools, some high schools. There are actually 13 high schools that it's part of the curriculum. University of British Columbia has a comprehensive South Asian program, including Punjabi. Simon Fraser is working on Punjabi. That's the good news for those who value Punjabi as their heritage language. I also see, in the context of diversity, you talked about Pakistan, that if in that nation one narrative is being imposed. So here we are in Canada, multicultural society, very diverse. In fact, just to give you one little stat, I served on the Vancouver Police Board as its vice chair. The Vancouver Police Department, they speak at least 60 languages. We could serve, people of the city in their own languages. That's kind of the richness of what's happening. Is there a risk to a country like Canada where we're all immigrants other than the First Nations, but is there a risk to Canada that as people maintain their heritage languages, put pressures on government to fund teaching in schools and universities of the country, actually long-term, its fabric that it connects it gets frayed and broken? Do you think there's a risk that way?
I don't think there is any risk. It gives people more freedom. And if all the languages in Pakistan, Pashto, Sindhi, Balochi, Punjabi, they are accepted, we call it national languages. We don't call it local languages or provincial languages, because all these languages have been there since centuries and very old. All the languages are very. I think this is very important, and we can also have the example of Switzerland. There are 3 languages, and here also many languages are allowed to function and taught, and this gives it makes the country more stronger, I think, because the more people will participate, the more people will own the country, and if they have their rights and they have their language rights and other rights and cultural rights, I think this is a very good thing, and Pakistan should learn from Canada and other countries like that. It's a very good example, and you are fortunate, I think, living in Canada and having these privileges.
Yes.
We don't have these kind of privileges there.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. Let's open it up to some questions, some comments. If you're making a comment, keep it brief, more focus on asking a question to Zubair.
Is it on? Yeah, I would just like Zubair to talk a little bit about his love for Lahore and his experience of living in Lahore and its impact on his stories. I have not read this English translation, but I have read his Punjabi stories. And in my mind, Zubair is a storyteller of Lahore, the life of Lahore, the people of Lahore. And Lahore, as we all know, it has a central place in Punjab. It has a central place in the heart of every Punjabi, no matter where they live. And I mean, at my house, I have about 20 books, maybe more, of those people, Hindus and Sikhs, who were living in Lahore before partition. And of course, they were kicked out. And with so much nostalgia and love and affection, they write about Lahore. I have personally seen people with tears in their eyes when they talk about Lahore, people who have lived there. So my own impression is that a big part of Zubair's story is the city of Lahore, right, even though it is in the background. So
okay,
if we can talk about
right,
it.
just briefly say a few things about Lahore.
Lahore, you can say memories of Lahore became very dominant because in our youth, Lahore was very, very different. Somebody told me that you are always talking about Lahore of 70s. ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਪਤਾ ਹੈ ਉਸ ਜ਼ਮਾਨੇ ਦੀ ਲਾਹੌਰ ਦੀ ਪਾਪੂਲੇਸ਼ਨ ਕਿੰਨੀ ਸੀ? ਕਹਿੰਦੀ 15 ਲੱਖ ਸੀ, 1.5 million. So now this is almost, maybe you can say 15, I think, maybe 15 million population in Lahore. The Lahore was very calm and beautiful, and evenings were very romantic. There was no pollution, and especially as Lahore of 70s was just like Paris. There were full of cafes and restaurants, intellectual, all famous poets were sitting in cafe. You can meet Faiz Ahmad Faiz, other writers, and there was a culture of reading and other things. So, and that is now lost. So that absence of a certain, you can say, time is, in my memories, I know that Lahore, which is lost and which is no longer there. Here just I quote a quotation of Marquis. He says that it is not remember how you live your life. It is important, or it is more important, how you remember it.
Beautiful, beautiful. Lahore in 1847, when the British took control, had much higher rate of literacy than London did. And then it's after the British policies, the literacy rates began to drop. Just to put it into a historical context.
This is true.
Gentlemen, you have a comment.
Two very quick comments. As someone who hears it all the time, it's my maternal language too, and traveling especially to Pakistan, I feel like it's a dying language. You talked about how it's not taught. I increasingly find that even though there is really no script for it, it's not being taught in schools, there's also a shame in Punjabi families where they don't want to speak to their children, and whether it's in semi-rural Punjab or urban Punjab in Pakistan, they'll speak to them in Urdu, but not Punjabi, because it's somehow they're now seen as a language of the illiterate. It is not a sophisticated language. And isn't that tragic in terms of the preservation of a language that is already being lost in terms of a script at school? Now people aren't even speaking it.
It is true. The language is, if the Punjabi language is there, it is just because of the illiterate people. The moment a person gets educated, especially the woman, I'm sorry, but they will immediately start talking in Urdu to their children. So some people say you talk about mother tongue. Even mothers are not talking in Punjabi. What kind of mother tongue you are talking? My mother was, used to speak Punjabi, but the new mothers of the last 20 years or 30 years, they are not. And one of the reason Punjabi is there is because of the poor people. So if Pakistani government or any government makes these poor people rich, that will be another thing. But I don't think this is going to happen, because as the time passes, we have the data of World Bank and IMF that how much poverty is there. So it is the poor people actually, and people like me, who are in minority actually. The people, educated people, some of the very educated people are, the good thing is some of the very educated people are coming to write in Punjabi and own Punjabi and culture and other thing. So, but this is, my writing in Punjabi is a kind of resistance. Actually, it is my being. I think if I will not write in Punjabi, I will not be there. My being will be demolished, lost. So, ਅਸੀਂ ਨੂੰ ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਹੋਂਦ ਪੰਜਾਬੀ 'ਚ ਅਸੀਂ ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਹੋਂਦ. So it is by being actually. It is a kind of resistance. And thank God that this resistance is increasing, and maybe we are able to overcome, and the Punjabi became the provincial language of Punjab, maybe.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
You talk about two sides of partitions. You talk about Punjab and you talk about Bengal. My grandfather left Gujarat before partition, and we speak Kutchi at home, which is a Sindhi dialect. So when partition happened, Sindh went to Pakistan and Kutch went to India. But being, I'm just thinking before partition, perhaps people who spoke Kutchi probably wrote in Sindhi. But after partition, that was lost to us, I think, And also, if you look at the disposition of Sindhi people, Hindu Sindhis were dispossessed because they had to move to India. But if you look at the Indian national anthems, Sindh is still there. Janaganamana, Abhinay Sindh, and all this is there. So, again, people forget that there's more partitions this than Bengal.
What is your question?
Yes.
I'm just making a comment that there's another partition there as well.
Okay, we'll have two more questions. Anybody on this side? Anyone on this side? Okay, I don't see any, so I'm going to. Okay, there's one back there.
Thank you. I just had one question. So, has your writing been translated into Urdu?
Yes, it has been translated in Urdu. And maybe it has been published in some website, but I am not going to, you can say, facilitate it. It has been done by some professors of Urdu literature, and they thought the stories are very good, and they were given to the student as an assignment to who were doing MPhil or PhD, something like that. So a whole book is, you can say, is prepared. But it is with the students or with the professors, and I don't know whether they are going to publish it or not. But some of the people, some of the Urdu writer, say to me that they should be published in Urdu or in Sindhi or in other languages. So,
yes, last question over there.
Yeah, hi. Thank you so much for your reading and also your discussion and explanations. I found your idea of language as being in resistance very interesting, and I was wondering if you could expand on that.
Thank you. Resistance means that Urdu is imposed on us. Or the elite in Pakistan, elite are the people with the resources. They taught their children in English. So if you have money, you can have very good English. You can buy English. So if you can pay, you can buy English. You have, everybody is thinking, even nowadays, even now, Urdu is, I think, suffering. The English has almost, you can say, taken over. And resistance is that we do not accept this cultural dictatorship of one language. So I am rooted in my own language. The stories I have written about Lahore, I think they could only be written in Punjabi. ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੀ ਖੁਸ਼ਬੂ ਨਹੀਂ ਆਣੀ ਸੀ ਫਿਰ ਨਾ ਉਹ ਕੋਈ ਦਰਦ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਹੈ the pain and suffering I couldn't express in other language, second language or third language. It could only be impressed in my own first language and in my mother tongue. The resistance is that we are not going to accept the policies of the state. So we are writing, I am not the only one. It has happened in Africa. They have fought and worked for their languages, and they have tried to write in their own languages everywhere, where the colonialism, and they have imposed their policies. The people, the writers is the most sensitive and the most conscious person in the society. So being a writer, I could only, I think, if the question was, the Punjabi is dying, or the languages are dying. So my only resistance is that I should write good stories in my own language. So this book is a kind of, you can say, this book with English translation is a kind of recognition of Punjabi language. It is also a recognition of Punjabi language, that there are so good stories, are the stories which could be translated into English, and the people in the world, here in Canada or in other countries, could read them and understand.
That's a nice way to draw the evening to a conclusion. This is exactly what the Dhahan Prize set out to do. To become a bridge between the script divide, between Shamukhi and Gurmukhi, the geographic divide, the religious divide. Literature, what is great literature? Think about this. Ask yourself the question about great books, the books that you have read. How have they spoken to you? How have they touched your life? How have they given you new perspectives on maybe conflicts, on terrible things happening in the world? Great literature is that which brings light into the darkness, into our own souls. At the end of the day, it is our own individual journey. Yes, most of the world's languages are under threat by the sheer dominance of a number of other languages. Look at the First Nations. I'm concerned for their languages which are disappearing very, very rapidly. But the encouraging part is young people from our First Nations communities are emerging and say, we want to preserve, we want to revitalize. And universities like SFU is standing along with them, as is UBC, as is the Dhahan Prize with the indigenous peoples. So I think there is hope. So how are you going to be further inspired by what Zubair has said? You buy this book. Can you set it up? We're going to sell these books. Buy, read, encourage others to read. Thank you very much for coming. We really appreciate it.
I just want to say, as a concluding, that all these my stories, actually, I have written for the people I have met in my life, experienced. It is actually my love for the people who have been part of my life and my environment, my mohalla, and it is actually my love for the people I have experienced and encountered, friendship, love, other thing, everything.
Great.
Thank you.
The books are $10, so if you want to set them up. And Zubair will remain here. If you want the books to sign, we'll be here for another 15 minutes.